Introduction to Spec-Driven Development and Vibe Coding. If you're using GitHub Copilot, sometimes it writes exactly what you need, and then some other times it is completely way off. The difference isn't really the AI, but it's just how you are guiding it or prompting it. In this video, I want to introduce two terms, Vibe Coding and Spec-Driven Development. These aren't really formal methodologies like Scrum or TDD. I think the first terminology to come out and that became popular is Vibe Coding because it sounded very cool. I think it probably was maybe too overhyped because effectively what it is just just prompting AI in a very unstructured way to build you a very complete application. So just feeling your way through it with a vibe, continuously chatting, going back and forth, and you are just really praying and hoping that you're going to have something useful. Now, the goal is not to argue which one approach replaces the other. So I'm not going to try and say spec-driven development is better or produces quality code. All examples I'm going to be using C# in .NET 10, then using Visual Studio 2026 with GitHub Copilot. So now the first thing, why do these terms exist? This is pretty straightforward. The answer to this is very simple. AI is quite popular right now, and most of the code is probably going to be generated by coding assistants. So before AI, specifications were often very informal and outdated. And along came Agile, which might have even twisted the need for specification even further. So formal specification might have been seen as being a little bit too anti-agile and getting in the way of getting some tangible working code. Now, as AI became available, large blocks of code can be generated quickly. What you tell the AI matters more than how you're going to be typing quickly. And if you are very unclear with your intent, AI is just going to probably just try its best to understand the intent of what you're trying to achieve. So these terms really just became popular. I still think they're very overhyped. There's too much hype around them, and it's pretty much just common sense. But now starting with the first one, what is Vibe Coding? It's the most informal way that you can work with AI, most naturally through prompts. If you're giving it short instructions via trial and error, you describe what you want, not necessarily how it's going to be built. So let me just show you exactly what I mean. I am going to just type that create me this game. Let's say create me a Pac-Man game. And then Vibe Coding is going to very quickly generate all the logic, everything to do with this game. I'm going to have a working, let's say, Pac-Man game, or let's say even the classic Snake. So without getting into too much detail or anything, or I have a working product very instantly. Other examples might be you might prompt AI to build you a dashboard with charts, create API for products, or make this UI look a little bit more modern with gradients and everything. Where Vibe Coding works very well is when you are doing creative work, like if you have a user interface or layout design, if you're going to be building demos or prototypes, or if you're working in a problem space that's already well understood. So most algorithms are well trained on that specific domain or that specific problems. And I repeat this example again, games, everybody knows all the rules or all the specifications for pretty much all the games. So basically, Vibe Coding, if you need a lot of speed and you don't really care about the implementation details or performance, so that's going to be good for Vibe Coding. Where things start to break down, it's if you starting to want more control over the business logic. For example, now if we want something more formal or serious, such as approving a loan, I can give this prompt to Copilot, something like generate this code, this vague prompt for just approving a loan. Now this is going to be the method that it generates, but is this right? Does it match the business rules? Will it be able to handle the edge cases? What about the debt to income ratio, age requirements, the different loan types? There were no explicit requirements given to this loan approval system, and we're basically just rolling the dice and hoping that somehow AI can fill in the gap. I mean, requirements is still part of software development. It's not really a chore that should be outsourced. it's still a responsibility of maybe the product owner or somebody within the team. Vibe coding starts to struggle in the back end or domain heavy code, and there are several common failure points. First, you're going to need an architecture if you're building a large system. Lower level backend code needs some kind of structure. AI can generate the code, but it won't design the system unless you show it some kind of maybe a template or you guide it in some way. The second is if AI has to start from scratch without any example, and there's no existing solution or pattern in the code base, AI has got no context of what you're saying. I think the correct popular phrase is hallucination, where it pretends to sort of come across as intelligent, and because it has to show something. I've never met an AI prompt that said, no, I can't do this for you. I'm not able to produce this code. Now the prompt interaction, the chain of going back and forth, is really going to start becoming slow and frustrating. Now the third part where things can fall apart, explicit requirements. Requirements like loan approval depend on keys, very, very specific details such as age, credit score, the income, and maybe sometimes even some rules within a given country. So these cannot be reliably captured in a single prompt. Another problem with Vibe coding could be where the AI starts generating a lot of code duplication. It doesn't track what you would have done before. So it doesn't track your helpers that you might have used in a different class or the libraries that you're already using. So it will just conveniently just spit out new code every time it finds a pattern that you need something similar again. So here's an example of duplication code when I'm using Vibe coding. In this car listings website, there is a service, a complete project that I've created for managing or handling images, the uploading of images. Now, when I went on a high level into the UI or a different project, the user interface project, whenever there's a bug, AI just typically wants to create its own version of this image uploading functionality for each different page. So on the create page, there will be an image uploader, and then on the edit page, it also tries to recreate that functionality again. So it's got no concept of this reusable component that only needs to be fixed once. So now another big gap where Vibe coding might become ineffective is if the team has some strict conventions or coding standards. So if there are custom patterns, naming rules, or architectural decisions that are extremely hard to explain in just one simple prompt, and maybe it might be good to just show AI comprehensive examples, so instead of just describing it in a single prompt. So for all these reasons that I've just given, this is maybe where spec-driven development can start filling in a lot of the boring details or the hard explicit rules. Now, what is spec-driven development? It's just about making intent explicit before generating the code. Instead of just saying build me a loan approval system, you specify what the rules are, what inputs exist, what outputs are expected, what constraints are going to be applying, what the edge cases must be handled. The AI doesn't guess, it has to just follow those instructions. This is very different from just saying I'm just going to have a better prompt, I'm just going to improve my prompting. So you are actually very, very explicit and very detailed. A spec lives in the code base. It's repeatable, it's visible to both humans and AI. So it becomes almost like a documentation that can be validated and tested. So I love that phrase, like the truth or the single source of truth. It's no longer the code, it's not so much the tests, but it's this specification that another human, another different member of the team, like a product owner or maybe the Scrum lead, can read and understand and change if they need to change it. Now, how is spec-driven development different from prompting? This distinction is quite important. I mean, prompting is almost like very free-spirited or maybe almost too random. So there is no documentation or no tracking of it. or no changing of it. So once the prompt is gone, once you've entered the prompt, it disappears from the conversation. So that conversation is actually very easy to lose or forget, and you can't validate that conversation, or you can't place it under version control. Different types of spec-driven development. I think there's a whole spectrum from lightweight to comprehensive. The simplest and easiest starting point would be if you have pseudocode, and if you have some specs that are semi-structural. So this could be interfaces, could be method signatures, return types, or unit tests. So if you just give it an outline to what test to be writing. So for example, we have this interface, our loan approval policy. There are a couple of methods. For example, the evaluate method. We have given it explicitly the parameters that have got to come in, and it's got to return maybe a loan decision. And we are clear as to what the loan decision is. We have an enum, which is approved, rejected, and manual review. It's probably going to only do it once, and then it's going to be correct the first time. The second, moving up, if you have comments, that also counts as specification. This is also the single most important technique. The comments are not just documenting where you were documenting because you couldn't complete a method or there's something unclear, but they are also instructions for AI. The more detailed your comments, the better your generated code. In this example, it's a loan approval system again, and the comments here are giving all the expectations or all the parameters. For example, the applicant must be 18 years old, and then for different loan amounts, how the process should pan out. Now, another form of spec could be if you've got tests, unit tests that are written first. This could also be part of the spec-driven development. This is essentially test-driven development, but with AI as your implementation assistant. So once again, it's not strictly test-driven development, because you're not going to be doing the coding, the developing, or maybe waiting for the test to fail and then refactoring. So this would be the example of the test that we've created first. Reject underage applicants. And this would be like the acceptance criteria. These are more tests. So Copilot is going to understand this exceptionally well. We've written the test first, and Copilot would generate the implementation to make them pass. Now, probably the biggest or the more formal spec-driven would be if you have all the complete specifications in a markdown file. So for example, complex logic, spec, live in a markdown file alongside your code. The loan approval rules, again, we have a markdown for it. We start stating all the rules, the rejection criteria, the approval criteria. When a manual review is going to be required, for example, if the loan amount is greater than 500,000 and you have a certain credit score between 600 and 749, we might also add special cases. So these are, again, they exist and they sit next to your code. They're written in human language. They provide context there's no runtime dependency here. It could be implemented in any language. There's no framework. We're not saying implement this in Java or any other language. It's just a high-level specification. Now, why are more detailed specification better? And something maybe critical to understand, it should be common sense. So AI doesn't reason. It can only predict from training data. The more explicit your spec, the fewer assumptions AI can make, and the more consistent the output. And this is going to mean less refactoring you need afterwards, and the closer you get to correct. So the main thing is you don't want to spend too much time correcting AI and then it's always making a mistake on every attempt. Otherwise, it's no longer being productive. You might as well just write the code yourself. So specs are meant to reduce randomness. You can think of it this way. If you give it a vague prompt, there's just, again, that term hallucination, where AI is going to pretend to be very smart and clever, but now the detailed specs are going to sort of throw that time wasting out completely. So you can also combine vibe coding with spec-driven development. In practice, the best results when you're using both approaches strategically. And how I think about it, I'm building UI or presentation layer. So that's what I would be asking. Vibe coding, if I'm writing a business logic or data validation, you're gonna need to write a full spec. If I'm implementing requirements for a business analyst, you're gonna need to spec it. So different use cases for vibe coding, spec-driven development. For backend and domain logic, simplest thing is to just go with spec-driven development, write explicit rules in comments or markdown, write tests, and then create clear interfaces or contracts. For front-end and UI, you can simply just vibe code. UI is actually quite creative. So the framework would already have been defined, whether it's going to be Razor Pages or Blazor, but now the UI can just plug on top of maybe the services that live underneath. So, I mean, this should be, again, pretty obvious that you're not going to be vibing through your financial calculators or your tax explicitly for a given country, and you're not going to try and go in the other extreme where you're going to over-spec your button layouts and the gradients of the colors. So there's a bit of a balance. AI becomes your fast hands and not your decision maker. So I think that's maybe sometimes the mistake that even I would make. I just wanted to outsource everything to AI, like maybe do everything for me, brush my teeth, make me coffee and everything. But as a developer, especially when you're developing a new solution, you're still going to have to do some design or some thinking. You are the main architect and you define what and why, and AI can very, very, very quickly just churn the code. Now, in closing, spec-driven development is not really a new idea. What's new is how critical it has become now that AI is just churning out code pretty quickly. Vibe coding is useful for exploring and prototyping. Spec-driven development is necessary for correctness and maintainability. Knowing when to use each is now becoming another core skill for software engineering, just as important as knowing your language or framework.
Please compile. Please compile.